Welcome to Tales by Rabbit, magical stories for kids and adults alike. Today, we bring you the incredible story of Paul Bunyan, the giant lumberjack who shaped the American wilderness. Once upon a time, when America was still covered with endless forests, a baby unlike any other was born. He was enormous, so big that his cradle was made from two pine trees tied together. His parents named him Paul Bunyan, and even as a baby, he shook the house when he left. When Paul clapped his hands, thunder rolled across the mountains. When he cried, the windows rattled for miles. As he grew older, Paul became taller than any man alive. He could lift tall trees as if they were toothpicks. People in the nearby towns began to talk about the giant boy who lived in the woods. They said his footprints filled with rain and became ponds for ducks to swim in. Even the tallest pines bent in the wind when Paul walked by. One winter, the snow fell so high that Paul built tunnels to get to the barn. It was during that snowy season that Paul found his best friend Babe, the blue ox. Babe was a baby ox, stuck in a snowdrift and nearly frozen. Paul lifted him out, wrapped him in his coat, and carried him home. When the snow melted, Paul discovered Babe had turned bright blue from the cold. From that day on, Babe followed Paul everywhere. Together, they became inseparable, working side by side in the great forests of the north. Paul and Babe cut trees faster than 100 men. They cleared paths through mountains and rivers, creating the first roads and lakes of America. It was said that Paul dragged his axe through the land, and that's how the Grand Canyon was formed. Babe followed his trail, leaving giant hoofprints that became the Great Lakes. No forest was too thick, no storm too wild for the mighty Paul Bunyan and his blue ox. Paul soon became famous across the land. Every lumberjack wanted to work for him because his camp was the biggest in the world. They said Paul's camp was so large, it took a day to walk from one end to the other. When the cook rang the bell for breakfast, the sound echoed through 10 valleys. Paul's men used giant frying pans big enough to cook a dozen oxen at once. The pancakes were so large that Babe had to pull them across the griddle to flip them over. The workers used syrup rivers instead of bottles to pour over their pancakes. Every day, Paul and his men went into the forests to cut timber. Babe pulled the logs down mountains, across rivers, and through the snow. One winter, the snow was so deep that the men used Babe to pull sleds loaded with entire houses. Paul laughed and said, "Nothing can stop us, Babe, not even winter itself." The people who lived near Paul's camp told stories of his amazing strengths. They said he could chop down a forest faster than lightning could strike. Once, Paul's axe hit the ground so hard it made a crater that filled with rainwater. That crater became known as Lake Superior. When Babe drank from it, the water level dropped by 5 feet. Paul and Babe were heroes of the North Woods. They worked from sunrise to sunset, building logging roads and new towns. As America grew, Paul helped shape its wilderness into places where people could live and thrive. He never asked for money or fame, only that people respect the forests. He told his men, "The trees give us life. Always plant two for everyone we cut." And so they did. Paul Bunyan's coat became the first law of lumberjacks. One year, the winter was the coldest anyone had ever known. Snow buried the trees so deep that even Paul's camp disappeared under white hills. But Paul didn't give up. He harnessed Babe to his biggest plow and shouted, "Let's clear this land, old friend." Together, they carved giant valleys through the snowdrifts, freeing entire towns. People cheered as they saw sunlight again for the first time in weeks. They said the white paths Paul plowed became the first trails across the Midwest. When the spring came, Paul and Babe continued westward. They crossed rivers, climbed mountains, and chopped forests until they reached the Great Plains. There, Paul saw endless land and said, "This will be America's new home." Babe snorted happily, his horns glinting in the golden sun. They worked hard to make the land ready for settlers coming from the east. Paul used his axe to clear forests, and Babe pulled rivers straight so boats could pass. It was said that Paul once dug a trench so deep that it became the Mississippi River. The settlers thanked Paul and Babe for making the land livable. Children waved and shouted as the giant and his ox passed by. Everywhere they went, laughter followed. Paul would sometimes stop to tell stories to the people around the campfire. He told them to be brave, to help one another, and to never fear hard work. When the stars came out, Paul looked up and smiled. "This land is beautiful," he said, "and it belongs to everyone willing to care for it." Babe made softly, as if agreeing with every word. That night, they slept under the sky, their campfire glowing like a tiny sun. Years passed, and Paul grew older, though still taller than any tree. Babe's blue coat began to fade, but his spirit stayed strong. One morning, as the mist rose over the valley, Paul looked at his friend and smiled. "Babe," he said softly, "we've done good work." Babe moved once more, his deep voice echoing across the hills. Some say that was the last time anyone ever saw them. Others believe they walked together into the sunset to rest among the mountains they made. To this day, when the wind howls through the pine trees, lumberjacks listen closely. They say it's Paul's voice, still giving courage to those who work the land. And when thunder rolls across the plains, that's Babe running joyfully in the sky. Paul Bunyan became more than a legend. He became a symbol of strength and kindness. He showed that hard work and heart can shape the world. His story reminds us that no dream is too big, and no person too small to make a difference. Even giants, after all, start as small as we do, with hope, courage, and a dream. Moral of the story: true greatness isn't about size or strength. It's about the kindness you give, the courage you show, and the legacy you leave behind. And maybe, somewhere out there, Paul and Babe are still watching over us, smiling. Thank you for listening to Tales by Rabbit, where every legend comes to life, and every story holds a spark of magic. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more magical tales. Good night, and may your dreams be as grand as Paul Bunyan's adventures.